Head works at dawn, honesty at noon. My name is Colin and my job is to convince a river it can be trusted again. I work the night shift at the water treatment plant on the South Bank. The big concrete one with the stack that looks apologetic and the fence that pretends not to mind. On paper my job is turbidity, residual chlorine, flocculation basins, backwashes, and a SCADA screen that knows more about me than I know about it. In practice it's listening. To the flock mixer when it starts to speak in vowels, to the blower bearings when they clear their throats, to water itself, which does not whisper and does not shout. It just continues. I carry a meter that hates being dropped, a flashlight that flatters nobody, and a laminated card I made for the trainees that reads in big letters, "Do not trust long quiet." I live with Armin. He restores old books that have decided to forgive people. Bookbinder, though he says it as if the word should be thicker. He comes home dusted with the fine brown that centuries leave behind and smelling faintly of paste and leather and effort. He keeps a calendar of repairs in pencil because he enjoys erasing things with dignity. Our apartment looks across the canal where herons stalk the idea of themselves. On the fridge we keep a magnetized notepad titled Say in Daylight, because we promised not to invent truths after midnight. Sometimes the only honest thing in the kitchen is that notepad, doing its little job. The Tuesday the pumps were fine and I was not. I was at the headworks, the place where the river admits to being a river, and we begin to ask it to be something else. A rag screen had seized with enthusiasm. The rake kept pitching my way like a drunk friend insisting everything is under control. I shut the gate, locked out, tagged out, and cut a length of poly banding that had decided to be immortal. The rake cleared its throat, remembered its purpose, and so did I. I updated the log, took a picture of my boots for no reason anyone cares about, and pulled out my phone to text Armin a joke about our screen being a literature major, taking out what doesn't belong, obsessing over threads. That's when the joint email we use for deliveries blinked across the lock screen. Thank you for your stay, Riverside Hotel. Time, 12-10-302. Points, 200 added. I didn't call. Our rule for anything that isn't yet a disaster is 2 loops around the block before nomming it. My block is concrete and wet handrails, the catwalk over the settling basins and the crisp, echoing hallway past the UV gallery. I walked it twice. The blowers did their steady homework. A gull landed on a railing and made eye contact like a foreman. The chlorinator hissed its sentence, which is the only sentence water systems ever say. You already know. Armin came home smelling like someone had opened the window in time. He set a spool of linen thread on the counter, kissed the air, then my cheek, then the thin white line on my wrist from a stainless strap that met me years ago. The third kiss is always the calibrated one with him, and saw the notepad turn to blank. I held out my phone like a glass of water I wasn't sure he wanted. He didn't audition confusion. Yes, he said, resting his palm on the back of a chair as if wood could sponsor his words. The shop's press was tied up. The collector moved the viewing earlier. The gallery manager suggested a daytime room at the riverside. He lifted his eyes. I went, with Emile. Emile photographs books the way weather remembers a shoreline, for what it touches and what it leaves. Armin admires him openly, and in other circumstances I would, too. We worked, he said. It felt good to feel possible under a ceiling I didn't bind. There are currents you respect because they aren't yours. We need a clear table, I said. Tonight, no phones, no bone folders disguised as metaphors. I have a habit. I turn fear into furniture. I dragged the task lamp from my desk to the small oak table by the window, laid a square of plexiglass over it, slid a short string of battery lights underneath that refused to take sides, and taped a clean sheet of paper on top. I wrote with a black marker, clear table, one truth, one want, no asterisks. Armin set both palms down. His hands always looked like they survived the right century. My truth, he said, voice smooth as paste when it's opinionated, is I liked being looked at like I was still becoming. My truth, I said, choosing my verbs like valve positions, is I'm not afraid you slept with him. I'm afraid you'll write the final label somewhere I can't read it. My want. To want you now, not the museum version of later. My truth, he said, is I want to be seen when I'm still signatures and guesswork, not just when the board is square. My want. That you want me halfway, fingerprints and all. We added a rule to the fridge. 1 hour without screens each night and a post-it on the table before we brushed our teeth. The first week looked like a line of small requests. Kiss me without captions. Say no without a provenance. Hotel emails stop at the door, and then the hotel wrote again. Double points all month. Marketing is a metronome that loves itself. I hid in work. I pulled a jar test on a sample from the West intake because the river had sulked all afternoon. I adjusted the alum dose until the flock looked like cooperation. I backwashed a filter like apology done correctly. I swapped a chlorine pump's tubing and felt the tiny click that means the peristalsis is honest again. Between tasks, I wrote on a scrap, remember water, not the kind we shepherd through sand, the kind you drink when grief makes your mouth loud. That night, Armin wrote on the table, I want to be able to tell you when I like something that isn't you. I wrote, I want to offer more than reprimands. Smaller, more than apologies. Days pretended to behave. A tour group asked whether we make the water taste like water, and I told them we try. A teenager pointed to the UV array and said it looked like a spaceship, and I told him it is if you think about it. A heron stood on a handrail like punctuation the river approved. I came home to find Armin tapping gray paper to a wall as if installing better weather. Sunday, he said, let's take the local train to the outer beach. Arbitrary day. Late return. I said yes the way you say yes to a planned outage. Grateful for a darkness with a schedule. We went, 2 hours of noise that belonged to no one. On the beach I thought low visibility procedures, laughed at myself and let my instruments be wrong. We ate a sandwich that believed too much in salt and then another that believed in mercy. Back home he wrote, I want to be there when you congratulate yourself. I wrote, I want to congratulate you without checking the turbidity first. It felt like a joke and a process control note at once. The magazine that hires him offered a 3-day micro-residency in a concrete studio that pretended to be warm. Hotel included. I want to go for the work, not the soap, he said. I also want to prove I know how to come back. Protocol, nightly voice memo, morning I'm here, no poetry. He left with a reasonable backpack, a shirt I forgive the world for, and a single-serve citrus soap with a font nicer than it meant. I lived like a plant after a storm, orderly, alert, one bad idea from a spike. The second night I stood over the contact basin after hours, just me and the slow blue light the UV tubes pretend is moonlight. I listened to the building breathe, and to my own heart insist on being petty, and then on being brave. I walked the catwalk over the river intake and apologized to it, because apology needs practice and water likes to be consulted. Voice memo 1. The room doesn't smell like anything, it's almost sad. Voice memo 2. I'm here, followed by a blurry picture of a white wall that breathed better than we had. Voice memo 3 didn't arrive for hours. I rearranged our apartment like I was hunting a frequency. Jealousy has the mechanics of a stuck check valve. Then the text, I'm making my no. I told them I have someone. I said I'm not interested in being profitable for anything else. He came back. He put the melon-scented soap on the console. Drawer for things we laugh about without getting hurt, I asked. Drawer, he said. On the table he wrote, let's learn something useless together. We tried whistling in two parts. Catastrophe first, then a narrow miracle, 30 seconds of overlap without envy. Two streamlines agreeing to share a pipe for a stubborn inch. I don't want to be heroic. I want to be exact. Some evenings I open the archived hotel email the way you tongue a repaired tooth. Some mornings Armin comes home with a light I don't recognize. I can see the day tuned his frequencies. We sit. We talk low. We let our hands do nothing. Sometimes the table looks like a bric-a-brac held together by tape. Sometimes a music stand waiting for breath. Yesterday, a city council aide in a blazer the color of discharge asked if we could make the water a little more transparent for the ribbon cutting. He said transparent like a synonym for obedient. I told him we dose what the river needs and the river decides what it looks like. He tried a different noun. I recommended a different day. On the way out, a maintenance tech asked if I wanted the shell he kept in his locker for luck until it was. I put it on a railing where only I would notice it. On my way home, I texted Armin. I don't want all your notes so I can own them. I want to know them so I can recognize them. He replied, then look. The right way to tell a man whose hands are a language that you're listening. I ducked into a hardware store that smelled like competence and bought a strip of small blank tags. This morning the hotel tried again, last chance to double your points. I clicked change address and typed hours. I taped 3 tags along the bottom edge of the table and wrote on them in block letters, ME, US, today. Armin put his hand flat on the paper. One truth, one want, no asterisks, he said. My truth, I still want to be looked at like I'm a draft. My want, that you look at me like I'm always becoming. My truth, I said, is that I'm afraid of silence but less than yesterday. My want, to kiss you now even if our hands smell like paste and chlorine. He laughed one clean note and said, chlorine is not a perfume. I said, then lend me yours, and did the part that isn't about words. At noon, a sampler bottle slipped from a tech's wet fingers at the river gate and cracked itself into a lesson. I fetched another bottle and an apology and did the collection myself. Arm down into the cold, water up against my jacket sleeve, current pretending it remembers me. Back in the lab, I ran the tests, wrote the numbers, watched the color blocks announce acceptable. I stood for a long minute in the door of the UV gallery and thought about how much of my life is nomming invisible things and deciding whether they mean harm. When I got home, the notepad on the fridge had 2 new lines in Armin's handwriting. Say the hard thing before the hard thing says you. Keep the shoreline where you can see it. The little lights under the plexi flickered once, as if approving. Outside, a ferry nudged itself into the slip without changing the gulls' minds. Somewhere in the substation down the block, a transformer hummed its old yes-no and meant both. The river raised its polite shoulder and took its turn. And the switches of the city, if you'll believe me, decided for one night only to line themselves without complaint.